it over to Don.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Amy. Hey, everybody. Real quick introduction. Like Amy said, I'm a senior consultant here at Action Associates. I've been with them for a little over 4 years. Before working there, I worked in the industry. It was like an architecture interior design firm out of Philadelphia, as well as many other locations. And today's session is going to be pretty interactive, right? So we're going to take your questions at the end. I'm not going to kill you with a bunch of PowerPoint slides, but I am going to take you through some good demos, right? We're going to take a look at project planning, and we're going to take a look at what's called resource planning as well. So um, I am Vantagepoint Master Certified. I am Resource Planning Master Certified. Also CRM Master Certified in Vantagepoint. So again, feel free to drop those questions in there. We got a full hour to go over the topic today. So just take a look at the agenda here. We are going to talk a little bit about kind of your project work breakdown structure and contract management because they do tie into the project planning in Vantagepoint. We are going to spend a good bit of time demoing, right? So you can see the product, see how it works, see how the user interface is, how easy it is to use. If you're still in Vision and you're comparing it to Vision, see kind of some of the changes that are coming. We're going to take a look at resource management so we can see utilization percentages, scheduled percentages. We can see it by many different areas. We'll show you how to filter in there as well. And we're going to take a look at some of the resource planning reports and dashboards that come along with Vantagepoint. And then, as Amy said, we're going to open it up for questions and answers. So as we go through here, I'm just going to go through some slides here. First slide is really around the contract management. So before I get into contract management, I do want to talk about the work breakdown structure. So if you are coming from a Vision database, there are some changes in Vantagepoint. So in Vision, you could have a standalone plan tied to multiple projects. In Vantagepoint, it is a one-to-one relationship. You can't get to the plan until you create the project. So really, it's really helpful with being the structures are tied together. So the work breakdown structure for the project is automatically the work breakdown structure for the plan. You don't have to worry about manually entering anything into the plan. If you update the project, the plan will automatically have it in there. So if I set up my 5 phases at the beginning of my project, and the client comes back and asks for an add service, and I add a new phase for add service, I only have to add that to my project, and then that will show up in my plan. Now, talking about contract management. So contract management, has a couple different options in here. Your compensation tab versus your contract tab. Your compensation tab is kind of the equivalent of your budget and revenue tab from Vision, right? It's just entering in your contract values versus the contract tab, which is where you can track contract over contract. So contracts that have been signed versus contracts that have been sent out for approval. At the end of the day, when they are both included in fees, they will show up in your plan, which is really nice to be able to have those contract values hard-coded directly from contract management over into your plan. So that way, when you're starting to plan that project, you can actually see how you're going to be doing against that compensation. And we're going to show you that in that demo. This is the contract tab here, where you can have multiple contracts, and then you're tying those contracts to the lower level of the project. So that's how you're going to see that there's $2,500 for schematic design versus $10,000 for DDs. So we're going to get into the plan, but for plans in Vantagepoint, you have to check the plan out before you can do anything to it. And if it's checked out to somebody else, you'll be able to see that in the plan. We'll show you that as well. You can do what's called a check-in. That'll, checks the plan back in so you can check it out. That can only be checked out to one person at a time. So you can't have multiple people in the record working at it at the same time. When I demo it, you'll be able to see, in the plan itself where you can see who is actually in the plan. So that way, if you wanted to say, hey, are you done in the plan? I need to do something in there. They can publish it, and then you can check it out again. So again, we're going to demo it from creating a plan right from scratch. You're going to assign resources, right? So whether they're employees or generic resources. Generic resources are, I don't know who's going to do the work yet, but I know I need a designer, I need an architect, I need a project manager. It's sort of a placeholder that you can then come back, and as you kind of have more information around who's going to be delivering that work, you can come in here and replace those generic resources with actual employees. You enter those resources at the lowest level of the project. So Vantagepoint calls them WBS 1, 2, and 3. You'll also hear work breakdown structure. So out of the box from Vantagepoint is project phase and tasks, but lots of clients will change that to project task and subtasks, project billing group and tasks. So any combination of the 1, 2, and 3. If your project is down to the third level, that's where you're planning your resources down to. You can control the columns that you will have in your view for project planning. So we're going to go through and show you kind of how to add and remove, and then kind of move things around within those columns. It's basically tailored to you. So what's nice about that is that you can, I might take that information one way in the columns, and you say, I don't like that, but this way works for me. So you're really customizing that view, and that'll stay that way until you come back in and change it again. So we'll go through and show you how to do that as well. Setting your schedule. So I'm going to show you 3 different ways you can set the schedule for your project plan. One of them is on the schedule tab here. This is part of the resource planning module, right? So I'm going to go through today and identify what's part of the kind of basic package where you have project planning, and then what are parts of the actual resource planning module as we go through it. That way you can kind of identify what you have currently, and that way if it's something you're interested in, you know what you're looking for. Baselines. So after you set up your plan for the first time and you say, yep, that's what it looks like, I can save a baseline, and then I can report against that baseline as I go through the project, really helping me like identify, am I, over planning in one area, under planning in another. Currently in Vantagepoint, you can only have one baseline. So if you save over an existing baseline, you'll lose it. But we'll talk about, there's some future state out there that Vantagepoint will potentially have multiple baselines. Just some kind of like housekeeping for project plans. You can create a plan at any stage, right? So if you have CRM and you're using in pursuit stages, so you can create a plan at any stage. I have lots of clients that use the plan to help them develop their fees to create their proposals, right? It's not just for projects that you've won. You're only planning for hours in the future, right? So you're not going to go back and plan any hours behind you. You can turn on some settings within your database that will allow the timesheets to autofill from plans. You also have the ability to copy from a plan. So much like you can copy from a timesheet in your database, you can copy from a plan as well. And in those situations, just the work breakdown structure comes in. So it's not going to fill in the planned hours. You want to put in your actual hours there. This is a really big one. Make sure you publish when you're complete. That's what pushes it out to the full database. We're going to go through that today. And it's a plan. It's going to change, right? So to make any changes during that life cycle, just remember you always have to check out. You're going to make your edits, right? Any updates that you have to do to the plan, and then you want to republish it as well. We'll get into some of the settings as well, right? So what's nice is that you can set default settings within your database. So it's, every time somebody sets up a new project that's not being copied from an existing project in the database, it will bring in sort of those default settings. So if you have a certain rate table, like a 2025 standard table, whether it's labor category or labor code tables, that will come into your plan. You can see in this example here, I can do it between cost billing and cost end billing. This really comes down to, what do you have access to in your security role? Do you have access to cost? If you don't, it wouldn't be an option here. Again, you can set a target multiplier and an overhead percentage as a standard, and then you can project by project tweak that, right? So say if we're not going to make the normal multiplier for whatever reason. You can come in here and set a different target multiplier. This is where you can come in and set your rate tables. So it's really important, because the rate tables from, say, like your billing terms don't talk to project planning. So if it's not a standard table, and it could be a million different things, a client table, a discounted table, we've got so many tables out there. You just want to come into this labor tab here and make sure that if you're looking at it through billing, that you come in here and you set the right table here. So that way, as you start to plan your resources, the rates that are coming into the plan are the rates you're expecting. You can do planning for your labor. You can also do planning for expenses, consultants, and units in Vantagepoint. Um, and then you would come to these expense tabs here. Maybe you have a multiplier on your markups for your expenses and your consultants. You can identify them in the plan as well. So that way, as as that plan is going forward and job to date costs are hitting the plan, I can see that the cost is coming in, and then I can see what I'm expected to bill back out based on my markup. These are resource planning settings, so it covers basically your project planning and your resource planning settings. So depending on what you have license-wise, you may not have all of this in here, but this is where you can come in and set some of those default settings, where I can set, the multiplier and the overhead percentage and the table that I want in there. If you are interested and you kind of go down the road to purchasing some resource planning licenses, the first thing we do is we work with you on your settings because you want to make sure that foundation is set before you start planning against it. There's an area in the plan called other actions. So this is just a detail of what all the areas, items under that area do, right? So some of them are here because it's part of the projects hub, not necessarily related to planning. So activity codes, touch points, proposals, right? They're there really because it's part of the project hub. But down below here, so we'll talk about reverting, deleting plan assignments. It just removes all the resources that you have planned from today forward. The plan settings themselves, which we just kind of went over. The check-in area, so if I needed to check in a plan, I could do that here as well. Project settings, again, really is not necessarily related to planning, but is, like I said, because you're under the projects hub, you get some more project area in there. And then printing reports. This will take you over to the reporting area where you can go through the different reports. So all of these reports on the standard tab here, these are part of the resource planning module. So not part of the standard package where you have the actual project plan, but these are all the reports that come with the database if you have the resource planning module. And I will say I have a nice little cheat sheet that came directly from Deltek that details what each of these reports output is going to be, which I find really helpful just because I feel like people get frustrated with reporting, not because they don't know how to use the reporting module, because they don't necessarily know what report they need. They kind of get halfway down the road and they're like, oh, I can't get what I need. And they kind of get frustrated and kind of walk away from it. So this is a nice place, and I can share it with Amy and we can share it with any of the attendees. It's just basically a cheat sheet that says if this report is going to give you this information. And I think that that's really helpful without having to kind of guess. Okay, so we're going to pause for questions, but I am going to go back over into my demo database here. So right off the bat, I just want to start with the project itself. So I have set some of this up prior to the meeting just so you're not watching me create a project, right? That's not why you guys are here. This particular project, I just set it up like a design job, right? A couple of phases. I have a consultant in here. I've got some reimbursable expenses, simple design job, right? So then the next thing I did is I want to come over to my contract management and I want to put that information in. So again, contract management works two ways. If you want to track contract information, there's some settings in the database that you will turn on. If you're going to use it just for the compensation, like the budget and revenue tab, you would just be entering the data directly in here, right? So I'm using the full database. So I've got the contract in here. No, actually, I don't. I'm just using budget and revenue. So in this demo database, I'm just using the budget and revenue, but this is that contract tab where I could come in here and add a contract, put the information in at a summary level, and then allocate it down to the lowest level of the project, right? So that's how that information would come in there. This particular database, I just have it as the budget and revenue. So I came in here, and if I go into, and this is true in any hub and Vantagepoint. So whenever you see the three little dots and the hashes here, this will take you into what's called list view. So that way I can come in here and I can open this up and I can see that I entered in my values per phase. Now, all this information is going to funnel over to the project plan itself. So all of that, the project itself, the contract management, and the plan all live under the projects hub. right? So although they're in different areas, they are all located underneath the project hub. The plan itself, right? So again, I don't have to worry about the structure of the plan. That's coming directly from the project. And that is a change from vision, where I could have a different structure. I could have a different compensation. I could change different rates. So there are a lot more guardrails in Vantagepoint when it comes to planning. So when I get into planning, just because there's a lots of columns left and right, there's a couple of things I do to help myself. I want to close my navigation pane, and I can close my summary pane as well. And now I've got full screen, right, that I can work with here. First tab here, really just informational. It's giving me my project and my structure. It's giving me the status of each of those. It's giving me the contract values that have come in from contract management. And then I've got a couple of tabs here. So this schedule tab here is part of the resource planning module. So if you don't have the resource planning module, you won't see this in your database. So I could come in here, and this is where I want to set the schedule for my project, right? So this is when this particular project is going from June to the beginning of September, right? So I can use these slide bars, but you notice I can't really do anything. Nothing's highlighted. I can't do anything. I have to check it out, right? So I can also see up here, it's last modified by Pat Hill. I am Pat Hill in the database. So if I go to checkout, now this says its plan is checked out to me. If you were coming into this project plan, it would say the plan is checked out to Pat Hill, right? So you wouldn't be able to come in here and do anything to it until either I publish it or you check me in. So down in the grid here, I can use, there's a couple of things. There's a hand, and let me back up a little bit because I did set the schedule before the training. If you're setting up your project, and initially before you save that project, when you're first setting it up, and you set your estimated start date and your estimated completion date within your milestones, it will set the whole plan to those dates. So everything would come in and they would all be this length. Then you can come through here and you can see at the end of the row, if I get my hand close enough, there's a black arrow left and right that I can collapse and expand, right? I don't have any assignments right now, so I don't have to worry about redistributing anything. There's nothing planned in here. I can use the boxes over here. Some people find the slide bars a little bit tricky, so you can just come in here and set your dates, and then it'll set the slide bars to those low lengths. You'll also notice that there are yellow arrows at the end. So these are called dependencies. What these do is basically say that design development is dependent on the end of schematic design. So if I drag the two arrows together, it links them. So that way, if the client calls and says, oh, schematic, we're not going to start until the middle of June. If I pick this up and move it to the middle of June, it's going to pick schematic design up and DDs up and move them out the exact amount of days I already had it planned for. So I don't have to move both of them individually. If they're all tied to one another, right, you can just grab them here. And again, if I'm going to move that out, it's going to move them all out the same staggered, right? I'm going to just drag them back here, kind of the beginning. If you put them on and for some reason you want to take them off, you just click in here, use the X. It'll take off those dependencies. What's also nice in this view here is that if you are, say, using the plan to develop your fees, right? So maybe not necessarily fully scheduling, but really kind of get a gut check of what it's going to take dollar-wise, so that way I can put it in my proposal. You can also come up to other actions and export this out to a Gantt into a couple different types here that you can then drop into a proposal, right? You can kind of give them that schedule in a visual view as opposed to just some, maybe Excel information. You can see the scale. So it's called scale here in Vantagepoint. You can change this scale from month to days to weeks to quarters to years on the schedule tab. Each tab has a different scale. You can have a different scale on each tab. I'm going to leave mine in months. The labor tab. So this is where, this is nice to show you. So this will show up as Deltek is pushing out new features, and they'll pop this up and you can say click here for more information. It'll take you over to some maybe, I think it's over to more documentation and more videos. This one here is filled hours per day. We are going to look at that today. But as they kind of have new development out there, they do kind of have these pop-ups that show up for you. When you're done with them, you can just shut them down here. So in my labor tab here, I've got my full structure. Again, I got my status. I could, if I don't have the resource planning module and I don't have the schedule tab, I can set the schedule here as well, right? So it's going to be automatically, like I said, tied to your project structure. So you can come in here and set the dates there. The contract itself is coming in from contract management. Now, there's a couple of columns that I brought into my view that don't come in as a standard that I find very helpful for myself. They are the planned billing and the contract value. So to kind of manipulate the middle grid here, and I can like drag this over a little bit too, right? So that way I get more real estate. This bar here also slides back and forth. So if you need more real estate in the middle, you slide it to the right. If you want more real estate over there where the dates are, you slide it in, right? So you get to kind of play around with that time. This little gear over here. So you're going to see this kind of throughout Vantagepoint. This is your grid settings. This is what allows you to control the columns that are in your view. So if I click on my grid settings here and I go to column settings, everything on the right is already in my view. So status, plan start, plan end, planned hours. I brought over the planned billing and the contract. So anything that you want to bring into your view, you just want to use the little arrow here. And this is true for any one of these grid settings. Whatever you push from available to selected is going to automatically go to the bottom of your list here. So then you can move these around by putting your hand over the 8 little dots. And then you can drop and drag this to put these in whatever order makes the best sense to you. And again, once you set it that way, it's going to stay that way. So you don't have to worry about keep resetting it and resetting it. It'll stay that way until you come back in and make any additional changes. Okay. The other thing before I actually start going in here and putting in resources, I want to make sure that I have my plan settings correct. So if I go to other actions and I go to my plan settings, I can see cost and billing, so I'm going to leave it on cost and billing, but really where I want to go is this tab here. And I want to make sure that this table, because I'm looking at it through bill rates, this table is the table that I want attached to get the right rates to come into the plan. Right, so you want to come in here and set that. Again, there'll be a default setting in here, so if it's the default setting, you don't even need to come in here. Expenses, this is where I can come in and put my markup. Same thing with consultants. Units as well. So once I have that ready, I'm really ready to add resources, right? So whether they're people or generics. I can also, so now I'm on the labor tab, I have a scale here too. So I can scale this by weeks and months. What's really nice about this is that you can change the scale as the project progresses. So maybe the first couple of phases are pretty quick, but maybe I'm going to sit in construction for a year. Well, I can then manage the first phases by weeks, and then I can change that scale to months when I want to start looking at construction. So that way I'm not having to manage construction by week. So I am going to drag this guy over a little bit here. So to add resources is this little plus sign here. So you can add it at the project level, you can add it at the phase level, you can add it at the task level if you go down to the 3rd level here. So once I click on the plus sign, it's going to bring up my whole project structure over here on the right-hand side. And then what's really nice, as you start to use this planning module, you'll find value in this view here. I'm working in a demo database, so it's not fully loaded, but I can see what percentage everybody is scheduled for during my project. So that way, if I come in and I'm like, well, Brian's already 71%, maybe I'm not going to put it on Brian, right? So this is going to give you some visibility into what everyone's scheduled percentages are right here in this view. So like I said, you're just not going to start, burying people under work when they're already busy. So in the drop down here, all the ones up top here are Deltek searches, right? These are the ones that are provided for us. So all resources, so all my employees, all my generics, just my employees, employees I supervise, just generic resources, and resources in my organization. Everything below this line are custom searches that we've created. Now, the custom searches, you don't create them here in the project plan. You create them over in the resource view under resource management under the separate module. But once you create them over there, you can use them here in the plan, which is nice. So if you're planning for the same 10 people, you create yourself a great search over in the resource view, and then you can come in here, and what it'll do is it'll just bring in the people that are part of that group in the grouping below. So that way I can highlight them individually, right? Or if they're all coming in, highlight them here. And it's easy as hitting the little plus sign here to add them to each of the phases. So if I wanted to come in here and say we're going to add them, it's just hitting this plus sign here at each one of the phases. Maybe I know that CA Bruce isn't going to be available, so I can then take him out. Again, so anytime you are coming in here, anything below this line is going to be custom searches. Once I have them in here, I can assign them. Now they're going to show up in my plan. Right, so now I've got my plan. I've got the individuals I want in my phases for my plan. And then I can start planning for them, right? So a couple of different places you can enter the time or the hours that you want to associate with them. So one of them is in the ETC hours. ETC is estimate to complete. So that's everything in the plan from today to the end. So I can come down here and I go to Amy and say, Amy's going to give me 25 hours. And what it's going to do, it's going to take those 25 hours, it's going to look to my plan settings to find that rate and bring in my plan value, right? So that way, as I'm planning, I can see how I'm doing, right? So then I'm going to say, well, Brian's going to give me 15 hours. And Bruce is going to give me 25 hours. Right, so I can see that as I'm planning here, right, it's rolling up against my $15,000. It's telling me how many hours in total that is. And then it's putting the hours over here in the right-hand grid. So because it's all happening in June, all those hours are showing up in June here. Unlike a phase where it's crossing over 2 months, right? So this one here, I've got some more time here. So I'm going to say 50 hours. And what it does, it's doing a calculation based on the amount of work days left in each month. So this one's starting on June 30th. So it's only giving me 3 hours in June, but putting the majority of the hours in July, right? So that's going to do the automated calculation for you based on work days. But that doesn't mean you can't override that, right? If you wanted to come in and change that and say, actually, it's really more 10 and 40, right? And it's going to backfill the information the opposite way. It's going to put it back in the ETC hours, but you can allocate it differently for yourself here. Right, so then we're going to say 50 hours, all looking against, maybe we'll go over on this one a little bit. So, right there at my contract value. And you would do that for the rest of the phases in the year, right? Build that full plan all the way out. If I was going to plan for expenses or consultants, right, I could come in here. They work very much the same way. I'm going to show you consultants because I find my clients are more, they probably lean into the consultants more. This is a nice little one-stop shop too where you could go. You can come in here and I have a phase for that consultant, but if it was part of like your fee within CDs, you would do it here. It's the plus sign. What's really nice about the consultants is not only can I say what type of consultant it is, it's a reimbursable consultant versus direct, I can actually tag who the consultant is. Right, so we're going to say it's Martin Engineering. Right, so, and that total from contract management is coming in. Right, so I'm going to say, again, the cost is going to be $15,000. But my plan billing is $17,250 because I have my 15% markup in my plan settings. So this is a really nice place for a project manager because not only can you see kind of the planned information, you'll be able to see the invoices that are coming in from the consultant as job to date in here, right? So really nice feature. You can also plan for units in Vantagepoint as well, right? Find your unit table, find the unit in here. If you know it, you can type it in here, right? So if I was to say, workshop, right, it's only going to give me items that are in workshop. Cancel out of there. So kind of as my first round, right, I'm like, okay, I got my plan done. A couple of things I want to do. I want to save a baseline. So again, this is going to be, it's not a separate plan. It's a snapshot of the data that you're putting into the system. So if I save that baseline, that's going to get suppressed. I only point out that be careful with the save baseline because it does have the word save in it. So some people think it's saving your kind of work as you're going through here. The system is saving as you're going along, right? So you'll notice that there wasn't really a hard save that I had to hit here at any point. It's saving all the data. Now, nobody can see this information because I haven't published it. Publish it is going to push it over to the resource management view and that module. It's also going to push it out into reporting. It's going to push it over to project review. So publishing it here, it's going to bring up a dialog box and basically say that it's going to be available now for reporting and resource management. When I'm in the plan, I can see it's not published, right? As soon as I publish it, it's going to go from that yellow square to a green square. Right, so now I can see that it's published. But the moment I change something, maybe I get a phone call and somebody says, Amy's going to be out and can't do 25 hours. She can only give me 15. The minute I come back here and change something, that publish and the save baseline comes back to life. So any change I make, I would need to republish it so that way that new information is going out to reporting, going out to project review, and over to the resource management module, right? So you want to make sure that as you're making additional changes, you want to make sure you republish it. Now, there are some kind of guardrails within the security roles that you can say whether people can save over a baseline, right? Some people have access to costs. So there are some things we can do to kind of mitigate some of the problems that might come along with it. I'm going to republish it so that way it gets over there. Now, on the contract tab, I said there's not a lot you can do here, but there is some charts, right? So as the project is going to, it's just some information, right? It's going to, and this is basically hover over top of it. So it kind of gives you your information coming from the contract, right? So again, not much you're going to do over here, but you do get some charts out of there. Once I have that published, now I can see it in a few places. I'm going to stop over in project review. So I can see my contract value. If there was job to date cost in here, right, I would see this here as well. What my baseline billing plan is, what my EAC is my estimate at completion. So my estimate at completion is a calculation of your job to date plus your ETC. It gives me my planned variance, right? I've only got $36,000 planned or $34,000 planned against my $100,000 contract because I didn't finish the whole thing. So it's telling me I have a huge windfall here at the moment. As the job to date hits here, this is also a blue hyperlink you can drill down into that you can see the actual spent, and you can go down to the lower level here, right? How did I do on schematic design? So 15,000 versus what I have planned here and my variance as well. So it'll show up there. Like I said, it'll show up in reports. We're going to take a look at that in a little bit. But it's also going to show up in the resource management. So this whole area under the hubs here, this is a separate module. It's called the resource planning module. So it gets a little kind of confusing sometimes when we're using the terminology because it shows resource management here, but it is the resource planning module. We're going to take a look at the resource view and the project view. So the resource view is going to give me a view of utilization, scheduled percentages, or planned hours, okay? I'm going to just quickly take off some filters that I had on in a different training session. Again, I'm going to close my navigation pane so I can kind of get more real estate on the screen here. Down the left-hand side are all the different filters that I can use to get the employees that I want in my view over here, right? So some of the options are I can come in here and pick individual people. Show me just employees, show me just generic resources. So this is a really nice feature. So the generic resources, I could say, show me just the generic resources, and my forecast range in here, I can say, show me the next generic resources in the next 2 weeks. Because if I have generic resources in plans that are starting within the next 2 weeks, I got to get people assigned to that, right? So using those views to kind of update and maintain the project plans is great. Show me just active employees. Show me people that are underutilized or overutilized so I can balance the work. Show me a supervisor and all the people that report to that supervisor. Show me somebody in an organization or in a particular organization or profit center. Show me all the project managers. Show me all the architects. Now you're getting into kind of tracking information in employee records. So show me somebody with a particular skill, right? Show me an archaeologist. Show me all the business developers, right? So these are sort of all the standard ones that come in here: titles, credentials, location. What's nice is that you can also add fields here. So if there's a certain field that was maybe a custom field and maybe not a standard field that we use to filter on, we can add custom fields to this list here. So that way, if you want to search on department or line of business or any combination, we can add them in there. Also, if you're never going to use credential, skills, location, you can get rid of them from your view. It's hard to see on the demo here, but there's a little X here that you can kind of click and it will get rid of those. So it cleans up the bar so that you're getting what you need in here. The way that the resource view here is, again, I have a forecast range, so I can use this two ways. I can use it to see short-term burn, and I can say, how am I going to look in 6 months? Do I have enough work for the people? Do I have enough people for the work? So you can change that forecast, and it will update the right-hand grid over here. Again, you have a couple different options in here. So this one's sitting on scheduled percentage, but you can do scheduled percentage. You can do utilization percentage target. So this is utilization percentage is looking at the utilization target in the employee record and doing that calculation. So if in an example, if you're supposed to be 85% utilized and you're 85% utilized, you will show up 100% utilized in this view. Scheduled percentage is looking at your hours per day, whether you're a 40-hour work week, 32-hour work week, and kind of doing that calculation. And then you can just look at it at planned hours, right? So like I said, we're a demo database, so we're not fully built out here, but I wanted to show you the difference. There's color coding in here. So if I'm underutilized in Vantagepoint, it's going to be a blue bar. If I'm overutilized, it's going to be red. And for gray, it's going to be kind of expected utilization. So if I have no utilization target because I'm not billable, I'm going to show up gray, right? So, and you can toggle between those. They've added some other options in here where you can see the hours and the percentage individually or together in the view. So if I click on this, you're going to get hours and percentages. You'll notice this is a pretty long list. So the way it comes in by employee, alpha first name, right? And it's going to have all my employees. And then below my employees, it's going to have my generic resources. So all of my generic resources in here. And you'll notice there's all these dead spots where there's no planning in here. So what they've done is they give us a couple of filters to kind of make the view a little more palatable, right? So hide ETC, right? So this is going to say hide resources, so people that don't have any planned hours in my range, right? So you can see how long the list is to begin with. And if I click on this, then I can apply, and it's just going to kind of get rid of anybody that doesn't have anything planned. Also, within the people, right, they may have projects. So the way it works, I don't have a good example here, but the way it works here is that even if there's no planned hours, if the planned end date is in the future, it's going to show up in your list here. So then you'd have a bunch of projects that don't have any hours. So then you can come through and say, now hide all the projects that don't have any hours. So that way you can kind of filter down to get just what you're looking for here. You also have a project filter. So over here is your people filter. Over here is a project filter. So then I can say, just show me active projects, active regular projects, so our billable projects. Instead of a person's organization, show me a project organization. show me a particular project manager, right? It'll kind of, and then projects here, different stages, right? In pursuit stages versus my awarded stages, the step behind that, and probability. So you have lots of different ways to filter to get the grouping of people that you really want to look at their resourcing. Now, the beauty of this is that you can use this tool in Monday morning staffing meetings, right? So you can have this on the big screen, you're in the room, and you can make live time changes, right? So a lot of the things that you can do, and I'm going to find my project here with Amy, my project planning. So I can see all my phases, I can see the dates. I can do a lot of things here in the plan on the fly. So if somebody says to me, you know what, we heard back from Amy, she's still available, we're going to give her back her 25 hours, right? I can give her the 25 hours here. So I do want to point out, when you're in this view, there's no checkout, there's no publish. As you're making changes, it's automatically saving it. It's automatically updating your plan back in the projects hub. So, and the other distinction would be here in the center grid, unlike where we could see the contract value and kind of the dollars going up and down, when I'm making the changes here, you don't get that view here in the resourcing. It really is looking at their percentages. It's not looking at like maybe the compensation against your planned bill values. You'll notice you've got grids here. So again, you can come into your grid. You can bring in additional columns. You can take out additional columns. At the end of the row of any planned hours, and this was in the plan as well, you can reschedule and reassign and delete. So I can reschedule hours. There's a couple different ways to reschedule hours. Shift, which means I can just pick a new start date and I'll move it out the exact amount of days. Change duration allows me to change my start and end date and whether I want to keep the hours in there. So my example is I had an original schedule of 4 weeks, reducing it down to 3 weeks. In the first example, it would take all those hours from the 4 weeks and push them into the 3 weeks. In the second example here, it would take those hours on the 4th week and drop them off, right? So those are the two distinctions between those. Reassign means we find out, wait a minute, you know what? Amy's not available to do schematic design work. We want to reassign that work. I can come in here and reassign a portion of those, that time frame. I can reassign a portion or a percentage of the hours and then give those hours to somebody else. So maybe we find out, again, Amy's only able to do 50% of the hours. I can come down here and give those other hours to Brenda. And it's basically telling me that I'm changing what my baseline would be, right? Because my baseline didn't have Brenda in it. So it reduced her hours and gave the remaining hours to Brenda. I can delete the hours, right? So if I click on the end of 3 dots here, I can delete hours. You can't delete any job to date information that's hitting the projects, but you can delete hours from today forward. So like this is a nice view in here, right? Under the actions, I can check in. So if somebody had a plan checked out, and I'm in this view and I'm trying to make updates, I can do a check-in. A check-in will save whatever information the other person had in their plan. So it's not, I would say envision when you had people in the same record, it was like whoever saved first got their stuff saved. And then when the second person went to save, it said there was another user in there and most likely kicked you out of the database completely. Here, they've kind of worked around some of that, some of those issues as well. So that's resource view under the resource management, but there's also a project view. So this one here, I call this one project planning light because you really don't have any of the tabs. You don't have consultants, expenses, units. This is really just your labor. What I typically see my clients using this for is not setting up the plan and not in the resource meetings, but maybe my own cadence of keeping my plans up to date, where I can come in and create a selection that says, I want to see projects that are active where the project manager is me, right? So project manager is me, right? And then it would show me all my projects 1 to 4, right? So then I can come in here and just spot check, right? Like go through and just say, okay, the dates look great. Resources are still available. Again, you can make a lot of changes here that you can do in the plan. So that way you don't need to leave here. You can go over into the plan and make those changes, right? So I can come in here and I can change amounts. So again, lots of ways to get the information into Vantagepoint. And then once we have it in, we can get it out, right? So now if I go up and done my stuff and reporting, so all the reporting in Vantagepoint is under my stuff, and you will have the reports that are given to you in your security role, right? So if I click on the reports here, it's going to take me into the reporting area. There's a couple different tabs. Wait and see if I can, there we go. So I already have it filtered on resource planning. So remember that all of these reports come with the resource planning module. So if you don't have the module, you won't have access to these reports. Some of the reports that I see a lot of people using are the labor resource plans and actuals. So this is going to say, this is what we planned. This is what actually happened. Different charts and summaries, forecasts, right? So again, like I said, I have a cheat sheet that kind of goes through each of these reports, what the output is supposed to be. Also within your My Stuff, under my timesheet, so I'll go to my timesheet here. I'm Pat Hill again. If I click on my name, this is my employee card, right? So in my employee card, I have an assignments tab. So I don't have anything planned for myself here, but I can come in here as the individual employee and I can filter on the forecast range and it can say, show me everything I'm planned on for the next 4 weeks. And then it will be projects, phases, and tasks, how many hours listed here for you. So that way you'd have full visibility as the individual of what you're planned on. Also within the timesheet, you have the ability to copy from the plan. So this would list off all the things that you're planned for in that time frame, and then you can pick and choose what you want to bring in. Again, it only brings in the left-hand grid. You still have to put in your actual hours here. There is another setting that is not turned on in this database that you can autofill from the plan. So when I came into my timesheet, it would have all the projects, phases, and tasks listed here that I was planned on for that week. Now, caveat with that is that's only as good as the plans are accurate, right? So you want to make sure that you keep, if you turn that setting on, that you are keeping up to date on those plans. It doesn't mean you can't manipulate the timesheet, come in here and get rid of things and add new projects. It is just going to bring in that information for you. Down in the settings here, under resource planning, is where you would set some of the default information, right? So on the plan settings here, this is where you would come in and you would identify, do you want to see decimal points? Do you want to go down to, do you want to plan rounded numbers? Do you want to plan, 12.5, 12.55? If you're not going to plan for expenses, consultants, and units, you can actually turn them off. So those columns will come out of your plan. So it would just be the contract schedule if you have the licensing and the labor tab. You can plan for expenses and consultants in calendar periods as opposed to along the entire project lifecycle. And then again, when you're doing your planning for labor, you have to go down to the lowest level. But when you're planning for expenses and consultants, you can say what level you want to plan down to, project, phase, or task. So you have a little bit of flexibility there. This rates tab here is where you would come in and put your standard rates and your rate tables, right? So if you had a 2025 table, you can come in here and add that as well. And that way, that would be the table that came into every new plan. So that way you wouldn't have to change it in your settings. If you have the resource planning module, there are some additional settings in here. One is you can identify what you consider what is overutilized and underutilized and what is under scheduled and overscheduled, right? So, and then they do have a lot of alerts that you can set up. You can be notified if there's a baseline change. You can be noticed if there's a budget milestone. This one's a great one, getting notified when your EAC exceeds your baseline, right? So that way I can say right off the bat, based on my job to date and what I have left in my plan, I'm over my baseline plan. And that might be okay. Maybe we don't have an ad service yet that has hit the project that's going to flip it back the opposite way, right? Whether there's been a plan creation, modification, or deletion. The one I like a lot is this one here because this one here is like a WBS level has been added. A lot of times the people that are adding the structure to the project may not be the person that's doing the planning, right? So this one you can say alert this person when there's a new plan or a new phase that's been added. So that way there's no kind of loss in the handoff. All right. We've got just a little about 10 minutes left. I've seen lots of questions kind of popping up, so I'm gonna ask Amy if we got any questions, and we'll field them as best we can. And if we don't have answers, we'll get answers for you. So, Amy,
Yep, we have just a couple.
great.
One is, can you add milestones within each of the phases?
No, not currently. We do hear that a lot though, so it's not a request we don't hear a lot. It's almost like you want to be able to have the plan as well as sort of deliverables during the plan, but currently no.
Okay. And then someone says that they missed the very beginning, so she's not sure if this was mentioned. Will we get will we get a copy of the recording? Yes, you will. Sorry, I didn't read it. I should have read it. Should have read it first. Yes, we will send out a link to the recording following today's session. PMs take shortcuts and put hours on the WBS levels rather than resources, and would really love to turn that off. Is that planned for the future versions?
So they are, read that one again, Amy.
PMs take shortcuts
Yep.
and put hours on the WBS levels rather than the resources, and would really love to turn that off. Is that the
Oh,
plan for the
gotcha.
future?
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going. They're not going down to the lower level. They're just populating at the phase level or even the project level. I don't know the answer to that. I haven't seen anything around guardrails to stop them because you're right. And I probably should have demoed that is that you can add those resources really at any level, right? I can go back into my plan and check it out and then come in here to the labor tab. And I could have originally started here and I could have just said my ETC hours. I could have put in here 500 and it would take those hours and just allocate them evenly. Um, so you can do it there. You can do it at the phase level. So I don't think that there's anything right now that would stop them from doing it. But I didn't mention this yet, but there's a really nice feature within the Deltek Support Center called the Share Your Ideas, which is it's actually really great because when you're thinking about something, you're like, oh, I really wish it did that. You are not the only one, right? So you go on the Share Your Ideas portal and take a look. You can, it's kind of broken down by category. You can kind of do a search for an idea that might already be out there. And you would be surprised how much traction those ideas get that hit the actual testing for early adopter testing, which is kind of what the partners do, and how many of those things actually make it to go live. So it's nice to have your voice heard. So even if it's not there today, I say go out there and take a look. You can vote on it. The more votes they get, the more that they have the ability to kind of get into some of the testing.
Great. Is there a way to report / filter to plans where the last update date was 30 days ago, for example?
Oh, good question. I don't know. And I don't know if it's through regular reporting either or dashboards, but I know that we could definitely do it through Focus. So Focus is a third party that we partner with that has almost like a Power BI feel to it that really gives you the information from your database and the ability to kind of filter it and filter it and filter it in many, many different ways. So if you haven't had a chance to look into it, and Focus is PHOCAS, take a look at it, ask for a demo. It's fantastic.
So it looks like somebody, so this was, that last question was sent to everyone, and it looks like someone responded, yes, you can do a search and plans at the top by modify date and then set your range.
Beautiful. Love it.
Yeah.
Hey, I will say this, I say it on all my things. I learn something every single day when I'm working with my clients just because people are they're really good at what they do, right? And it's good to get feedback and like I said, I put that in my back pocket and take it with me. So thank you.
Yeah. Is that specific to the plan or overall job record? So,
I don't know. Yeah, we'd have to play around with that. But like I said, there's lots of what's nice about it is if you have those reports and the dashboards, they're very dynamic. So there's a lot of options in there.
And then we've got one last one. Can you re-baseline to just add new tasks / change orders?
You can re-baseline, but you're going to lose the original one. So it's a good point. I mean, like, I do want to at some point say if I'm going to have like a huge scope change to the original project and my original baseline really doesn't have any bearing anymore, I can save a new baseline, but just keep in mind you'll lose the original one.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions? We've gotten through all the questions and we've made it to 3 minutes before the hour.
Well done.
Yeah, great job. Can the next upgrades include multi-currency planning? When the project is in a different currency than provisional cost rate, it doesn't pull cost information.
Ooh, no, I don't know, but we can look into it to see if there's if it's on the roadmap. They when we're at their kind of year convention, the Project Con, there's a particular session where it's 2025 and beyond. So you never really know where beyond is. So I don't want to ever sell anything, but we'll take a look and get back to you.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any questions? Doesn't look like it. This was a great webinar. Thank you so much, Dawn.
Of course.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to spend with us. And as I said at the beginning, and I reiterated a few minutes ago, today's session was recorded, and we'll send a follow-up email with a link to the recording. It'll probably be tomorrow at this point, but either later today or first thing tomorrow. Thanks again, and have a great day, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dawn.